This was Halloween of 2019. I decided to go trick-or-treating with two of my friends. For my costume, I was wearing a prom dress and heels. This is important to the story, I promise. We decided to go to the rich neighborhood next to ours to get better candy, but didn't tell our parents. Dumb, I know, but they wouldn't let us go if we told them. In order to get there though, we had to go through a slim wooded path no larger than 2 feet wide and very overgrown, rough, and then through a field. After about an hour and a half of trick-or-treating and our pillowcases filled to our liking, we decided to leave. It was near pitch black but light enough that we didn't need flashlights to navigate home. This also wasn't our first time cutting through to get to the rich neighborhood. We had walked most of the field, approaching the wooded path, when we then saw a flashlight. All three of us stopped dead in our tracks and pulled out our phones to turn on the flashlights on our phones. After about 5 minutes of looking around, we couldn't find where the light came from, and we decided to just brush it off, still a bit shaken. This is when things go down. I was first in line with my two friends behind me. We thought someone was behind us, but it was dark and we couldn't really see anything, so we just thought it was us just being scared 13-year-old kids. That's when we all heard a snap of a twig. We began sprinting through the wooded path getting scraped. When we were almost out of the woods, the mix of uneven ground along with my heels made my ankle roll, and I nearly fell. I was able to catch myself on a branch and then stand back up and kept running. The friend last in line, who I'll call Sarah, looked behind her, and there was a man a few feet behind us. Sarah then screamed at me to hurry the hell up, so I listened and I began to run even faster somehow. We exited the woods and got into our own neighborhood, running about 100 feet into our neighborhood before we stopped. We turned around and looked, and no one was behind us anymore. We then walked the rest of the way to our house, most of our families back inside due to it being late in the night. Let's just say I was never so excited to see my parents outside with their candy bucket. For every teen out there trick-or-treating, please tell your parents where you're going, and always be aware of your surroundings, because you might not get as lucky as we were. It was the early morning of Halloween in 1992. I was doing laundry. I lived in a nice side-by-side apartment with a laundry room about 6 doors down. We each had a small gated backyard. I'd go out my kitchen door through the back gate, turn right, and then walk to the laundry room. It was around 5 a.m. My plan was to get my laundry done, then travel to my mother's house about 2 hours away. Now, I had a black cat that followed me to and from the laundry room, but she would walk along the top of the back wall of each apartment's backyard area. On one of my trips back to my apartment from the laundry room, a man seemed to appear from the back parking lot walking towards the street. He was around 5'8", had a ponytail, was wearing a jogging suit type thing, and I thought he was heading out for a run. I went into my apartment and set a kitchen timer so I could get clothes right into the dryer and then another load into the washer. I put the load in the dryer and started another wash. As I headed back to my apartment, I saw that same man again. Just like before, he was headed toward the street. I felt a bit off after the second encounter. I felt him watching me walk, even though I'd kept him in my line of sight. Something was up. I packed some things and my timer went off. Time to check the dryer. I stepped outside my back door and my cat was on the wall waiting, but she kept looking over her shoulder and down. I think that man was hiding and she was tipping me off. I then went back inside and grabbed my biggest kitchen knife. I then went to check the dryer and came back. More packing. Timer went off. Headed back to the laundry room. As I closed the dryer, I then saw movement outside the door. I grabbed the doorknob and opened the door with all the bluster I could muster. It was him. He was turned sideways behind a light pole trying to hide from me. I then hollered, "What's up?" And he peeked out from behind the pole. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, making eye contact. He started toward me. I stilled myself. This laundry room locked from the inside. The last thing I wanted was to be trapped inside there. He veered to his left and walked behind the building. I then thought to myself that I dodged a bullet. Fast forward a week, and the guy's face was on the TV. He had apparently held 2 women at knife point and assaulted the both of them on Halloween evening, and he was also implicated in other similar attacks. I called the police and told them my story. When the investigator asked me why I didn't call the police, I then explained because, well, nothing really happened. I was willing to cooperate with identifying him if need be. I still don't know if they ever caught the guy. I'm a 31-year-old male, and this happened about 15 or 16 years ago when I was a freshman in high school. Myself, my girlfriend at the time, and a group of our friends who were all female except for me decided to go trick-or-treating one final time. Now, towards the end of a fun evening, we decided to go to a house. The urban legend said that it was John Wayne Gacy's mother's house. It wasn't, but that was what all the rumors said. Now, every year people would spray paint things like clown or threatening messages on the garage of the house. So we're just standing on the sidewalk just looking at all of this. Well, anyways, this old lady who must have been in her 70s or 80s comes running out of the house with a loaded shotgun. She then fires it right into the air and then proceeds to run after us at full sprint, firing the shotgun at us. We all, of course, took off like a bat out of hell and ran away. Luckily, we eventually outran her and literally ran straight into a cop out patrolling. Funny enough, he had received multiple calls of that same lady being threatening and acting violently towards people, including small children, all night long. But as she apparently had dementia, they couldn't really do too much to her. That was when we told him about the gun, which, number 1, this was a small town in California, and 2, with her history of mental illness, she wasn't supposed to have it. I know the cops came and took her gun away, and then arrested her, where she ended up being put in some sort of home, but we were never called to testify or anything. I don't know anything else that happened to her, but as a 14 or 15-year-old kid getting shot at, that was one of the scariest moments I'd ever had in that point in time. The story happened late October of 2022. It was my senior year of high school. My girlfriend Jade and I decided to go to a party that was to celebrate our football season, which had recently just ended. I had played football for 8 years at this point, and Jade had been doing cheerleading for 10 years. We felt like we should attend to give a proper send-off to our respective sports. Plus, I knew the host pretty well. We'll call him Jake, because he was also on the team and he had the house all to himself. The plan was for me to be the designated driver for Jade, my friend who we'll call Michael, and his girlfriend who we'll call Morgan, who were also coming along with us. Michael lives 2 cities away. Him and his family moved his senior year, and he decided to just finish high school in our city. Besides the main downtown area that's our state capital, our cities aren't very big, so Michael was only a 20-minute drive. This is important for later. Halloween was right around the corner, so that was the theme of the party. I went as Jack Skellington, just wearing the suit, and had Jane do my makeup to look like a skeleton while she went as Sally. Michael went as Chucky, and Morgan went as his bride. I'm like 90% sure her name is Tiffany, but if I'm wrong, I apologize. Anyways, we go to the party and a lot more people than I expected showed up. Basically the entire cheer squad, almost the entire football team, and even people from our rival high school, their football team and their cheer squad there as well. And like what you would expect from a typical high school party. People didn't know how to control their drinking, and well, things got really rowdy. I was playing a tag team beer pong game with Michael against 2 other friends when a familiar voice called my name. I turned to look, and it was a kid from our high school who we'll call Bob, wearing a Jason mask and his usual hoodie with jeans. Now, Bob was an odd specimen to say the least. I met him in my first term history class when he randomly came up to me and started talking to me. From the start, I could tell that he wasn't very good at socializing. Being on the football team, people expect me to be stuck up, but I try to be very open and nice with everyone, so I got to know him pretty well in that class. A little too well, in fact. He would openly tell me and my other friends in class about his frustrations about being single and a virgin, and how desperate he was to lose his virginity. He also didn't really know how to read a room or pick up on social cues. He also would talk like we've been buddies forever, and would make really unusual or out-of-pocket jokes. He also had really well-off parents. Both of them drove sports cars, and he lived in a huge house. Despite this though, he would wear the same clothes almost every day and had really long, greasy hair. He would also start high-fiving me in the hallway, which wasn't a big deal because it was just one more person to high-five on my way to class. Well, not long after that, I knew someone who went to junior high with him, and Jade told me how he had the biggest crush on her in junior high, and how he was only trying to be friendly with me to get closer to her. That didn't make much sense to me at the time, so I try not to look at him differently, but the thought had always lingered in my head. Especially since when he would high-five me, Jade was always there, and he would try to stick around a little longer and always include himself in the conversation. Again, I had no problem with this, especially because he wasn't stalking me 24/7. It's just at times I found it mildly annoying and creepy. He started small talk and I had tried to answer his questions as much as I could, but to be honest, I was way more focused on the beer pong game. He left me alone after a while. The party started to die down and I was sitting in a circle with some teammates reminiscing over our times on the team and talking about how we'd really miss it when I decided to rally my group and head out. Jade was sitting in a circle of her own with the cheer team maybe 5 feet away from me, probably doing the same thing, so gathering her wasn't that hard. The hard ones to find were Michael and his girlfriend. I tried calling Michael, but he didn't answer, and I didn't have his girlfriend's number. Our first assumption was that they were probably just making out or something in a bedroom. So we went about the house knocking on door to door, opening them and seeing if there was anyone there, then shutting the door. Bob saw me and Jade appear into our room and close the door when he then came up to us and said, "Whoa, what are you guys trying to do in there?" in a joking tone that just came off as creepy and awkward. I asked him if he'd seen our friend and he just replied no, so we kept looking. Bob then started following us around, which I was starting to get annoyed with. I eventually found Michael in the bathroom puking his guts out in the toilet with his girlfriend. While he was finishing up, I went to my friend Jank and thanked him for his hospitality, and I offered to come over the next day to help him clean up. He said it was okay, that he actually had some people spending the night, including his girlfriend, who was going to help him in the morning. I still told him I would stop by if he needed help. But we're heading to my car when I had then heard Bob say, "Hey man, could you give me a ride?" I was a little annoyed because I was already pretty tired, and I already had to drive out of the way to drop off Michael, Morgan, and Jade, but I just said yes anyways because I'm nice. I also didn't mind driving up to his neighborhood because there were a lot of nice houses, and around the Halloween season they're really fun to look at. I dropped him off first and started to drive to Michael's, which was now probably going to be a 25-minute drive, and it was already around 2:30 a.m. at this point. Morgan was spending the night at his house, so after dropping them off, I had started to drive back to our city. Jade had offered spending the night because I was tired, and I thanked her profusely. We got to my house, and after I changed and washed off as much of the makeup as I could, I just about crashed in my bed. I woke up to Jade in the bathroom that connected to my room. She apologized for waking me up and then laid down next to me. After a couple of seconds, she then got up and asked if I heard that. I listened and heard footsteps right above my window well. My room is in the basement of my house, so the footsteps would be in our backyard in the west alleyway between our house and our gate and fence. "It's probably just raccoons," I said. "No, they sound too heavy to be a raccoon," Jade then said. "It's probably just bear," I said, referring to my 100-pound Malamute. "No, we locked his doggy door, remember?" she asked. "He has a special doggy door that only opens when it senses this fob that we keep on our dog's collar. This keeps the raccoons out." It also had an option to completely lock, so even with the fob, the door won't open. I didn't remember locking it, but I also didn't have an answer, so I just stayed silent. She then got up. "Where are you going?" I asked, and she then replied that she was going to check if it really was Bear. I would really feel bad if I had let her go check it out alone. On my way up the stairs to the first floor, I saw my dog sleeping in front of the basement door, so it couldn't have been him. But now I was curious, so I go to our backyard door and opened it and then stepped out onto the porch. I looked around and couldn't really see much from on the porch with the porch light, so I stepped down and started investigating with my phone flashlight. I could see the glow of my LED lights through my window and didn't really see anything else. That's when an animatronic in my west side neighbor's backyard went off, scaring me. It was some sort of crypt keeper thing that has green glowing eyes and talks. My neighbors love Halloween, so they have decorations in their front and backyard. I jumped and this caused me to speedily walk back inside. Jade had asked me if I saw anything, and I just said no because I really didn't. We got back into my bed and I fell asleep. I woke up again in the middle of the night to the sounds of the animatronic going off yet again. I just assumed it was a motion sensor or something, and it was picking up a stray cat or raccoons, then went back to sleep. I woke up again in the middle of the night because of my LED lights. I like having them on while I try to sleep, but after I sleep they really bother me, and mine doesn't have a timer. I heard the animatronic again, but this time when I turned off the lights, I was surprised to see my window well glowing green. We have barred covers over them so that nothing can get down in them, but the well was glowing green and it sounded like the animatronic was right above my well. I was now freaked out. I don't know how Jade stayed asleep, but I laid there scared to move or anything. Eventually it stopped. I just sat there for a while awake, trying to calm down. I thought that it had to be someone messing with me, so after scrolling through my phone a bit to get tired again, I fell back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and saw my LED lights were still off, so I definitely wasn't dreaming about it last night. While Jade was getting ready, I called Michael to see if he was messing with me. He didn't answer. He was probably still asleep from being hammered last night. I then realized, why would Michael drive all the way over to my house drunk just to mess with me? I know his girlfriend wouldn't drive him either because she's more of a homebody type. Then it hit me. Our neighbors have a son who's my age. In fact, he played on the football team as well, and I knew him very well. I called him and I was actually surprised when he answered. I started telling him about the animatronic scaring me while I was outside, but I didn't mention the part to him about it being above my well. I wanted him to think that I just slept through it and that he went through all that work just for me to sleep through it like a baby. Well, he then told me that all of the animatronics should be unplugged because he and his family are out of town for the weekend, and that they wanted to prevent an electrical fire or anything of that nature. I've known him for a while, and I know that he can't lie very well, so this really caught me off guard. I also realized that I didn't see him at the party, so he really was probably out of town. I asked if I could go over and just make sure that they were unplugged. I texted Michael to call me when he was awake. Jade was finished and she said she would come along because she wanted to hang out with Jake's girlfriend. I explained how we have to go over nearby to check on all the animatronics, and she came with me. I went straight to the skeleton one to see if it was plugged in. It was unplugged. I followed the wire up and down at least 3 times just to make sure I was holding the right unplugged wire. I was. When we got there, the mess was already picked up besides a few cups. I went down to the basement to get another box of garbage bags with Jake, and I then saw a Jason mask on the floor. I picked it up and it was Bob's. The events of last night hit me. The footsteps, the skeleton. I wondered if it was Bob in my backyard. I thought there was no way. He doesn't even know where I live. He also isn't very coordinated. So seeing him carry an animatronic is just something that I couldn't even imagine. We did find it weird though how we would find his mask in the basement of the house. the one part that was off limits. Michael called me later in the day. I explained everything to him, and he was adamant that it wasn't him. I still don't know if those footsteps were connected with the animatronic, and I still don't know if Bob was even connected to those events. After that though, he had started acting even more strange. Either that or my mind really was open to how odd he was. Either way, as Halloween comes up, those neighbors have continued to put the Crypt Keeper in their front yard, and I still wonder to this day what happened on that chilly October night. The year of 2003 was a tough one for my family and I. My mother and father had just gone through a divorce, and my father was working late one Halloween night. I was 14 and my sister was 7, so my dad trusted me to take my little sister Emily trick-or-treating. When Emily and I had gotten back from school, I had noticed a piece of paper on my mailbox. It was just a piece of paper that said, "I would die for you." As you can imagine, this gave me the chills, so I brought it in to show my dad, but he wasn't home. He must have left the house early for work, so I decided to just throw it away and not let Emily know about it. That night, our plan was to go out and hit every house and get more candy than ever. We went out and we had a very fun time, and I even ran into some friends. We were on our walk back home when we had heard a voice coming from someone's house. "Hey kids, hey, come over here," a man said. We looked around and we didn't see anyone until Emily grabbed me and then screamed and pointed at the window. There was a man dressed like a clown. "Come in. I have Play-Doh and I have any candy here you can imagine." We then ran as fast as we could down the road screaming until we finally made it home. Once I got home, I realized that our front door wasn't just unlocked, but wide open. I remember saying hello a few times until I figured that maybe the wind just blew our door open. We sat in the living room and tried to just forget all about our encounter with the strange clown in the window. We were counting our Halloween candy and watching Hocus Pocus until we had heard someone knock at the door. We knew that it couldn't be our dad and knew for a fact that it wasn't our mom. "Who's there?" I said. There was a long pause until the person responded. "I'm Jesus Christ. I'm here to save you from the evil of Halloween." Emily screamed and we then ran into our dad's room with the door locked. I tried calling our dad a few times, but he wouldn't answer. Then we saw a figure near the window of my dad's room. It was a person standing there in a suit with a pig's mask. "It's okay. I'm Jesus, and I died for the sins of the children," he said. We then hid behind our father's bed and were scared shitless. We could hear him tapping the window and humming some strange song. "Let me in or I'll slit my wrist tonight when I watch you sleep," he said. We both just laid on the floor shaking in fear. Emily had started to cry, and I had to stay strong for her. After a while, the man had left, but my sister and I still stayed in the same spot behind our dad's bed for over an hour until my dad got home. We told him what happened, and he didn't even really care or listen much. He just wanted to rest after a long day of work. The very next day, we had had a disc on our front porch. It was a blank DVD disc that had "Do not watch unless you love Jesus" written all over it with Sharpie. I went into my room and started watching it on my PlayStation 2. It was some of the scariest and disturbing imagery I had ever seen. It was just very disturbing images of a very, very tall man walking in the woods on stilts in a suit. The video would cut with a VHS static effect to a silhouette of a man in a field on a cross. It would just keep cutting to random disturbing images. One other image I remember was in black and white of an extremely overweight man in bed with a ton of white face paint eating out of a tub of ice cream with his bare hands. The video had no other sound than a slight static sound in the background. I gave the DVD to my dad and told him what had happened, and he said he would take a look. That was the last I'd ever seen of that DVD, and my dad never mentioned anything of it again. He told me that he just threw it away and didn't really get a chance to watch it. I guess if my dad didn't care, then neither should I. I wonder who that could have been and why they wanted to scare a child so damn badly. Were they really dangerous, or were they just playing some really sick prank? I guess I'll never know. The year of 2014 was one of my favorite times in my life. I had just graduated high school, got my first job, and was ready for life to really begin. My high school buddies and I were still very close since we all lived in the same area. We kept our weekend shenanigans for as long as we could, until sometime in our early 20s when we all parted ways. Some of those memories we made really have a special place in my heart, but there's one incident that will rest in my memory in the most unsettling way. It was early October of 2014, and my friends and I were really excited for all of the fun we would get into during the Halloween season. There were tons of parties, haunted houses, as well as bonfires throughout the season. One night, me and two friends and their girlfriends were looking for something spooky to get into. It was myself, my buddy James, his girlfriend Morgan, and Trevor and his girlfriend Allison. I was the single guy of the group, and it never really bothered me to be the fifth wheel when hanging out with them. Trevor mentioned this old cemetery in our town that we were all familiar with. The cemetery was really creepy since there was an Indian burial ground smack in the middle of it. Our plan was to use one of those stupid ghost hunting apps, drink beer, smoke some pot, and just hang out and maybe see if something creepy would happen if we were lucky. When we arrived, there were no lights in the cemetery, and it was very dark. The cemetery was closed and gated, so we had to jump a fence to get in. I led the way with my iPhone flashlight since the other two guys were comforting their scared girlfriends. We were having a good time until Allison swore that she saw someone. We all thought she was full of it, but she swore there was a person in the woods. This really creeped me out, but I didn't let it bother me. I was young and overly confident in my ability to kick someone's ass if placed in a bad situation, so I played the tough guy. Don't worry, Allison. If there's someone actually out there, trust me, they don't want to mess with us, and I'll make damn sure of it, I said with a smirk. After a few minutes of ghost hunting, we all then heard a cough come from the top of the burial ground. It was hard to see up there since it was dark, and a big tree stood right on top of it. I wanted to be the hard ass of the group, so I had started walking close to it. "Hello?" I said as I started to walk up the hill. I heard and saw nothing, so I started to turn around. Then as I was heading back to my group of friends, we all heard the sound of an acoustic guitar playing. We all froze in silence and listened. We started to follow the music and we could hear the man singing a song about a skeleton. The lyrics were something like, "Poor skeleton, I've waited for you. Poor skeleton, I'll take you home." The girls were far behind as they refused to go anywhere near the music. Trevor stood back with them as James and I went to go see who would be playing music in a cemetery this late at night. We hid behind a tree as we watched a skinny middle-aged man with a fedora play a song. He was alone, and it seemed like he thought he was the only one in the cemetery. He then stopped playing and then just stared at the tree where we were hiding. I decided not to startle the guy, so I stepped from behind the tree. "Hey man, I heard your music and I wanted to get a listen. Sounds good," I said as he just continued to stare at us. "We were just ghost hunting and having some beer. We hope you don't mind," I said to him. The man just sat there still as a statue and just stared at us. I still get chills whenever I think of him just sitting there in the pure darkness right next to a grave. You couldn't see his face since the fedora mostly covered it. We began walking back to the girls and Trevor when we then heard the man then say, "Yeah, sure." James and I just stood there. When we turned around, he was in the same spot but standing. "What was that?" James said. The man started running towards us, and in an instant reaction, we ran off. The rest of our friends saw us running and thought we were just messing around. "Let's go, we have to go," I said. "He's coming after us." Trevor and the girls just laughed and made jokes. They thought we were kidding until they then saw him appear from the darkness. "This is my cemetery," the man said. You think you belong here? You think you can laugh and make fun of me? We stood there frozen in fear. You better stay the hell away from us, man, I told him. He then ran straight towards us as I held my fist up ready to hit him. He came really close to us, then jetted to the right straight into the woods. He just kept going until we couldn't see him. The 5 of us ran to the fence and then left. The next day, I asked my mom if she knew of anyone who owned that cemetery, and she said that the owners are usually there during the week just cutting the grass, and I should report what happened to them. Trevor and I went by a few days later and got to speak with the groundskeeper. We told him what happened, and he told us that we shouldn't be going to the old cemetery after hours. He lectured us for a short while, then addressed the concern that we had about the man. He told us they've caught all kinds of strange activity going on there at night. He said the most common are Satanists that come from the city at night and try performing odd rituals at the cemetery. He told us that he suspects the man to be a local who lives with his parents. He described the guy as an oddball who likes to walk around the cemetery during the day with no business being there. His description of the man was also pretty spot on from what I could remember seeing. I still to this day have not found out who that man might have been, but knowing now what I already know, I will never return to that cemetery at night. This happened when I was 12. It was nearing Halloween, so the town opened up a free haunted hayride for everyone. It was fun and kind of scary. It was set up at a local park near a football stadium, and they had their attractions set up on the huge open gazebo-like things. I was going with one of my friends, Kevin, who was the same age as me. We weren't very mature at the time, and I wish I would have done things differently. After we went to a few haunted houses they had set up, they finally had a spot open for us on the hayride. They drove us around while visiting these scary scenes they had set up. A school bus filled with zombies and a few humans begging to get out before the zombies chomped them down and then busted out of the school bus, which was surprising and really spooked me out a little. They began chasing after us while the driver just continued to drive. After a few more, we got off and went to the very last attraction. When we got in, there was an actor rocking back and forth in a chair, cradling a dead baby doll and sobbing quietly. After that, it was like a maze, except people would pop out of the corners and start walking, threatening you. Then we got to what we thought was the exit. It had a cage full of people clawing at you, dripped in fake blood, begging to be let out. There was a table with a chainsaw and fake gore all around it. Then you make your way into the woods, which we didn't know. That part was creepy because people just kept popping out at you. My friend Kevin, who's a bit of a wimp, then started crying when the skinwalker popped out and scared the hell out of us. He hid himself in a corner and the skinwalker just kept scaring him, which the other worker pointed at my friend and then directed me to go there and get him. This delayed us as we both had a curfew and a time to get back, so we kinda just rushed the rest. However, when we got out of the woods, we noticed someone following us. We thought it was just one of the workers, but they had a different ghost face costume. It looked cheaper, and we joked around saying that it wasn't actually a worker. We texted both of our moms that we were heading back, then started walking towards the exit. This guy was still following us, and we thought it was normal since it was a haunted Halloween experience. Others passed us, and he didn't seem to scare them or follow them. He tried to keep it low-key. Eventually, we saw him walk away when we got to the parking lot. We thought that was the end. After we made it into the neighborhoods, we had noticed a black SUV following us. I thought nothing of it, thinking since it's almost Halloween, it was just a bunch of teenagers probably trying to get a good scare out of us. Kevin didn't think so, and started speeding up, taking random turns, and we eventually found ourselves lost. The SUV was still following us. I then turned to him and said we should make a run for it, which he agreed, and we ran back into the streets and eventually found some place that we actually recognized. The SUV was still trailing behind us, and we didn't know what to do, so Kevin started texting his mom about what happened. The SUV kept getting closer and eventually slowed down when it was actually really near us. His mom said to come near the house and then go into the backyards to get into the house. We booked it, and the person in the SUV hopped out. It was the same ghost face that was following us, but this time he was carrying an actual kitchen knife. We thought this was a life or death situation, and adrenaline then kicked in. We just ran straight to his mom's house and started banging on the front door. He was coming closer now, and just as he was about to go up the stairs, my friend's mom opened the door saying that the police were on their way to the ghost face guy. He immediately ran and we assumed went straight to his car. After that, my dad came and picked me up. We contacted the haunted hayride manager. He told us that the only people dressed as Ghostface they had were there all night, then confirming that there was no worker at all. I don't know why, but Kevin's mom actually never called the police. It was just a bluff. We think that she didn't actually see the knife in his hand and just thought it was a worker who wanted to scare the hell out of some little kids. Which, if that really is the case, he took it way too far. This was Halloween night around 1980. I'm a 53-year-old man now, but I was 10 years old at the time of this story. We always had lots of trick-or-treaters in my neighborhood when I was a kid, so I always had a ball handing out candy to all of them. This particular night was winding down, and the trick-or-treaters had mostly been through and headed home. Well, as we were about to finish up and turn the light off, my mom had to run back into the house for something. This left me all alone on the front porch. About that time, I had noticed a strange car pull up next to the house next door with its lights off. A grown man steps out of the car and sneaks toward our house, using our trees for cover as he approaches. As he gets closer to me, he comes out to reveal that he has some sort of Leatherface looking mask on, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre killer. For a few seconds, he just stands there staring at me. Then he makes a couple of fake charges like he's going to run and chase me. Right about this time, my mom comes back outside as a last group of trick-or-treaters then come along. This person also notices this, and he then retreated to his car and then left rather quickly. I've wondered for decades whether or not this guy had any ill intent, or if it was just regular Halloween fun. It was a strange car, and I knew mostly everyone's cars by sight. It's one of my useless talents. Could he have been out looking for a kidnapping victim and my mom's timing prevented it? Not too scary for most, I'm sure, but it's something I'll always wonder about and get a little cold chill whenever I relive it in my head. I'm a male from Canada, and this story takes place 7 years ago. I was 17 and my little brother had just turned 13. He wanted to go trick-or-treating with me because his friend group had a bit of a falling out, and well, certain friends really refused to associate with others. It was a big mess and my brother didn't want to miss out on trick-or-treating, so although I felt too old for it, I took him. My brother dressed up as Dracula, and I just dressed in all black and wore a Jason mask. Low effort maybe, but it was something easy to throw together at the last minute. Our parents were in the house and we set off. I took my brother to some of my friends' houses and they gave him some extra candy since they know him. We had 2 big cloth pouches with us so we could get more treats. This also meant we couldn't see inside our bag the way we would if we carried one of those plastic pumpkin baskets. After we'd been out for about an hour, my brother was still in a spooky spirit, and he asked me if we could venture out of our neighborhood and into one of the more richer areas. See, my parents never allowed me when I was a kid to trick-or-treat far away, and they wouldn't have allowed my brother to do so either. But since I was with him and old enough to keep him safe, I figured that it wouldn't be a big deal. I called my dad and asked, and he said my mom said it was okay as long as I got my brother home for 9 p.m. and as long as we got a taxi or bus. I agreed and I called a taxi to take us on the 20-minute drive into the richer areas. The 5-bedroom houses looked like palaces compared to ours. Since we didn't know the area very well, we decided to only do 1 or 2 streets to avoid getting lost in the dark. Besides, we already had plenty of candy, and we were being a little greedy asking for even more. Most of the houses actually had the candy on the porch, and you just picked what you wanted. There wasn't much left in those baskets, but we knocked on some houses. The last house we knocked on was a large gray detached house with a slightly darker shade of gray on the roof. The house was modern looking like the rest on the street with big glass windows, and the house had one light on upstairs. If that light hadn't been on, we wouldn't have knocked and we would have just been on our way, but we decided to try before going home. I knocked on the door and a tall man who appeared to be in his early 40s answered the door. He had dark hair, and I couldn't tell if it was black or brown because the entryway was still in pitch black darkness. He had light blue shorts on and a black t-shirt with black socks. He smiled at us, and my brother then told him trick or treat. "Ah, you're here to suck on my blood," the man said in a terrible Romanian accent, grinning from ear to ear at my brother. I had to hold in a laugh as my brother bared his fangs and put one of his hands into a menacing claw gesture. The man pretended to cower away before standing upright again and asking my brother if he would like a bloody treat. My brother said yes, and the man held his hand out. For a moment, I thought he was trying to shake my brother's hand, which I thought was weird. So I put my arm around my brother and then said, "Hey man, I'm not trying to be rude, but my brother can't shake hands with strangers." I thought I saw a flash of something on the man's face, but it was gone quicker than it arrived, so I couldn't dwell on it for too long. He apologized and he said he wanted to take my brother's bag to put more candy in it, as it was in his kitchen cabinet. He explained that he thought the trick-or-treaters were finished, so he had moved a basket back inside. Before I could even say anything back, my brother then said, "Here you go," and handed him his bag. The man smiled at us before turning his back and then disappearing inside. I'd never had someone do that before, but I didn't want to make a scene, and I told myself I'd look at my brother's candy before he ate it. It didn't look like the man put any lights on, but he left his front door open. I don't know if he expected us to follow him or not, but we didn't. He came back moments later clutching the bag at the top before handing it back carefully to my brother. "You two have a good night now," he said before closing the door abruptly. We walked down the path and I got my phone out to call a taxi. My brother opened his bag and peered inside, gushing about how much candy he had. I had a peek too, and I told him we'd done well. When we got home, we went to the dining table and laid out our candy. I told my brother that I wanted to check his out, and he wasn't bothered by that and started eating some of mine. As I moved the candy, I then saw a CD among the wrappers. It was the kind of silver disc that you'd burn back in the early 2000s, like a mixtape or something, which I knew about because despite not being old enough back then to do it, I was aware of it when I was a kid. I grabbed it, and on the other side, for D had been written. I frowned and had a bad feeling. I told my parents, telling them about the man from before. My brother's candy hadn't been opened, and it was all fine, so he was way too busy eating to really pay attention to us. My parents were concerned and wanted to know what was on the disc. I had a friend whose parents had a really old tiny TV with a built-in DVD player on the back of it. It was in the basement and unused, but they kept it just in case they ever needed it. The TV was like 12 inches, and basically you could insert the disc in the slot on the back of the TV and then use the remote to watch the DVDs or play a CD. I told my parents I would take it over there and give it a look. They were hesitant, and my mom wanted to just throw it in the trash, but my dad and I insisted on seeing. My dad put the disc in the drawer in the living room for safety, and the next day he came with me to my friend's house to use the TV. He told me that he wasn't sure I should stay in the room, but I told him I'd found it, and if the guy gave my brother a disc, I wanted to know why. My friend was home alone because his mom was at work, and she was a single mom. It was lunchtime, and we all then piled into the basement and put the disc in the slot. It went in, and the screen stayed black for about a minute. I was thinking it was a dude, but then the screen panned out, and we could see light and noise started coming from the TV. My dad yelled at me and my friend to go up to the basement stairs, and it took me a second to move because I was so shocked. The noises were sexual, and the camera was moving to show a sex scene. My dad fumbled with the remote trying to turn it off before I got up and unplugged the TV. All three of us just stood in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. My dad told us to go upstairs while he gets the disc out, and my friend explained to him how to do it before it started to play again. My dad followed us up, and when we got outside, he threw the disc on the gravel and then stomped on it. He was red with fury, and so was I. I then told my dad where that freak lived, and he started pacing up and down my friend's walkway trying to calm down. He told me that he had to get me home before he did anything, so we piled into the car and drove home. My dad then said that he wanted to go to that guy's house and make him sorry, but when we got home and told my mom, she then insisted that we call the police, and then she told my dad not to do anything stupid. So my dad called the police and they came to interview me and my dad. My mom hadn't seen all the things that we did, so she didn't have to be interviewed for as long. I didn't know the guy's address by heart, but I could tell them where the house was. We then told my brother that the man hadn't given him candy. He had given him a dodgy disc and he was in big trouble for it. He was really embarrassed and creeped out, but it wasn't his fault, and we told him that. The police kept in touch, and things only got creepier from here. They ended up going to the house as well as looking into the background of it, and they informed us that no one was actually living there. My brother and I were shaking when we heard this. The police knew about the house being in darkness except one lit room we could see from the upper windows. They said that they looked inside the house, but all the lights were off now, and that no one was living there. Inside there was barely any furniture, and the police believed the room we saw light emitting from was an empty bedroom. This freaked us out. We couldn't show the police the disc though because my dad had smashed it in a rage. We know it was a man and woman in the video from what we briefly heard, but I have no idea if the man in the video was the same man who gave us the disc, or if he just downloaded some random porno from the internet. It really makes me sick to my stomach to know that this creep tried to expose my little brother to porn. If I hadn't been there, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. The cops have still not found the guy. My parents forbade my brother from ever going near that neighborhood ever again. And when he trick-or-treats with his friends, my dad always goes with them to keep watch. My brother thought it cramped his style, but my dad didn't care, and I understood. I'm 24 now and my brother is 20 and in college in the heart of our city. This incident still creeps us out, and my brother and I agree that if we ever have children, we won't be letting them trick-or-treat alone. Despite all the years that have passed, we still avoid that area, and I think we always will. I'm 20 years old, but at the time I had just turned 9 years old since my birthday's in October. My dad's side of the family all agreed to go trick-or-treating, so as you might imagine, that's a lot of kids. We drive over to the neighborhood that we were going to. My cousins and I agreed to go as a pirate crew. We started to walk and I ended up falling behind because my boot untied, and I'm a slow walker as well. For some info, at the time I couldn't speak any English, but I could understand some things. As I bend down to tie my shoe, I hear someone talking. They kept saying something about candy, so I started to hear them a bit more clearly, and I heard a click like from a camera. I then walked away scared. I was a bit paranoid as a kid. I eventually catch up with my cousins and look back to see this guy in a ghillie suit, which is a camouflage type bush suit that they use in the military. We keep going and not even 5 minutes afterwards, this guy's behind a whole nother family, but I just ignore it because he wasn't bothering me anymore. Speed up to around day 30. I fall behind yet again and I can hear someone calling me a good little girl. I look around and see bushes, and there was like 3 to 4 of them. Then across the street I see a playground with about 6 to 7 girls playing, along with 2 older women watching them. I look back to see my family at the next door already knocking. As I'm about to move past the bushes, I feel a hand then grab me, and due to me being jumpy, I moved away and my uncle then saw me, then came to grab me. My uncle didn't see the guy trying to grab me, he just wanted me to move faster with the group. We eventually finished trick-or-treating around 9, almost 10 p.m. The next day on the news, I hear that there were at least 4 girls who went missing from the park across from where I almost got grabbed at. Now, I don't know if they're connected or not, but when I tell you that this guy kept telling after me and other girls throughout the night, it really makes me think that it was probably him. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always stay